Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for adramofOutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Dinah Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and anything interesting that falls between. This is podcast episode 171, and we are in week 7 of the Fiery Cross read-along. This episode, we are covering chapters 11 and 12. And the setting is still the same. It's Mount Helicon, North Carolina, late October 1770, with cool gray and wet weather. Chapter 11 is titled Pride. You'll figure that out real quick why. And chapter 12 is Virtue. And the summary goes something like this. Roger seeks a kindness from Jocasta. Jocasta shocks Roger, and she gets a piece of his mind. The gathering is drawing to a close. Menstrual cramps strike Claire. Germain sings a tune. The mobcap dies an ugly death. Jamie consoles Claire. Jamie has a plan for the ridge. A deal is struck. Himself is in demand. All right. So now we're in the afternoon of the longest day ever. Ever and ever. Yes, the longest day on record is the final day of the gathering. And what we're still waiting for are the weddings that are supposed to be happening in the evening. And now we're in the interim time. And let's see what happens. The active characters in these two chapters are Roger, Jocasta, Claire, Marsali, Germain, and Jamie. Joseph Weems makes an appearance, as does the priest, but in a little tiny way. So Roger opens chapter 11, Pride, and he is leaving after meeting Iain Mhor, the brother in the Findlay family, who is stricken with some sort of illness and has to lay on a pallet. He cannot use his body very well. He can barely speak, if at all. And he's being taken care of by his nieces, his sister, nephews. And Roger is trying to figure out just how he lives in this time. How does this man survive? And he remembers the little girls coming in with the mush, the porridge, and feeding it to him. And they take care of him. So Roger deduces that family is what keeps this man alive. Having that connection, having that commitment, having that foundation, having something to keep you grounded. And we've seen this in Jamie, where when he is free from family, where he thinks he has no purpose or feels that he has no purpose, he withers. He does not do well in that situation. He needs to have that. He needs to have someone to take care of and someone or someones to depend on him. And even though he can fulfill those things without Claire by his side, he certainly makes better decisions when it comes to himself and what his life looks like outside of caring for other people. And he's able to be cared for as well. So Roger is starting to think about what's going to be happening later in the day. And as he goes up the hill, he sees Jocasta Cameron's tent. And it is this incredibly decked out, lavish tent. She's brought most of her house slaves with her. She's brought provisions that could feed how many? And he recalls the breakfast he and Brianna had with her. And it was this delicious breakfast and off of china plates and just luxury. And he's trying to think about the huge disparity between what he sees in front of him and the family he just left, who were in this tiny little lean-to, and it's been a rainy and horrible weather, and he wants to do something. And he puts it into the same sort of thought process that he had seen the Reverend, his adoptive father, do when asking for things for other people. So he's going into pastor mode. Like Roger can't stand seeing people hurting like that. He's really similar to Claire in this way, where she can't stand to see people hurting either, but it's in a different pathway, right? It's medically. Roger doesn't like to see people suffering in their circumstances and what's going on in their life, emotionally, in their relationships. Like, this is really where we're going to start seeing what makes Roger tick outside of him being an historian, because frankly, that job means nothing in the circumstances he finds himself in. He needs to develop other parts of himself to figure out what he's supposed to be doing. He's never going to be a hunter. He's never going to be a builder. He's not going to be good at some of those things. And being a folk singer also is not going to pay the bills, so to speak, and take care of his family. So he needs to find another avenue. So seeing Roger feeling so compelled in this vein of wanting to help the Findlays makes me think that this is going to be a path that Roger is going down. Remember, we've already seen in the last book when the priest found out that Roger was the son of a minister, that he wanted Roger to take his final confession and wanted him to do the things necessary for this man to die and feel somewhat at peace with dying. He also baptized the baby. So Roger's already getting put into this ministerial role, so to speak. But it comes very naturally to him. And one of the things we have to watch with Roger is, like Claire and Brianna, he doesn't tend to fear people in that century. He really should have a healthy fear of women. He should have a healthy fear of overstepping boundaries that are present in the 18th century. Because unlike Claire, who just does Claire, and she's going to be a doctor, and she's going to do what she does, and she's going to do surgeries, and blah, 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 she's doing her own thing, but she's not doing it for the name of all women in the 18th century. She's fixing what's in front of her and what she's compelled to do. So Roger has to remember all that sense of propriety and what people are used to and what modesty means and what personal relationships mean, because it's very different from the early 1970s. Even though Roger is pretty traditional overall, he wants traditional things, even though he's a pretty open dude, that there were a lot of restrictions. Like, he really shouldn't be alone in a room with a woman. He shouldn't go visit a widower who's by herself, etc. Like, so those are things that we have to think about as we move ahead with Roger on how do his 20th century values impact what he does in the 18th century, and how does that affect him, and what problems do they cause? So that's coming down the line, but we're seeing Roger with this absolute tendency toward being sacrificial and wanting to help people. And we get to explore the other sides of Roger now. It goes into Jocasta's tent, and she knows it's him immediately, simply by how he smells. And she tells him that his cut has reopened, and she cleans him herself. She can figure it out. And she touches him and cleans him, and then asks Phaedra for some ointment with golden seal and lavender, which is actually very good healing properties, both of them. Golden seal is good to keep out bacteria. I actually use it on babies' umbilical cords after we clamp and cut them and band them. I use little rubber bands most of the time, and they just fall off with the cord stump. But we put golden seal on there to keep out any harmful bacteria. And it helps this cord stump dry up faster and keeps it from stinking along the way and helps it stay dry. So she puts this on him and gets him cleaned up. And Roger then moves forward and asks her to do a kindness and discusses the Findlays with her. And she has a really interesting take on the Findlays, and that Joan, all she has is her pride. Of course she needs things. Of course they don't have shoes and socks and not a pot to piss in barely. But is she going to take anything? And Roger had not thought of this when he was struck to want to help them. He had not taken the approach of, would she want my help? What kind of help would she want? Would she accept it? He just wanted to be a do-gooder, which again, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, so we must be very careful. So thankfully, Jocasta had some sound wisdom for him and decided to hatch a plan. And that plan would be after the weddings that were supposed to be happening that evening, that she would have a bunch of food wrapped up because it's the last night of the gathering. It's going to go bad. Have the food wrapped up and given to her so it doesn't spoil. So then they could eat for days well on the food that was the leftovers from the wedding. Who doesn't love getting a wedding doggy bag? And then the other component of it was going through the priest who was there to marry them and giving essentials, basic essentials. She's not giving them anything fancy, but giving them some shoes and socks and skirts and tops and breeks and all the things that they might need. And they would be given anonymously through the priest that somebody was just led to offer. And that's kind of the backdoor way that they're going to go. Awesome. So Roger is very happy with this, and he's going to become, hopefully, a little bit more critically thinking about the processes of helping people. Claire waits for people to come to her, or she asks if she can help them. Generally. Not always, but generally she does, because she tries to fix the problem in front of her, not fix everything that ails them. And she does overstep sometimes. But especially in the case of this type of help, it can backfire on you in a hot moment, which is what Jocasta pointed out. So after we get through this portion, and he's very happy with the results of this, and Jocasta figured out a way not to be offending, right? She sends Phaedra away to do something, and then it's just Roger and Aunt Jocasta. So she wants to talk to him. He's ready to leave, and she says, "None so fast. I have a thing or two to say to you, young man." So he settles down in the chair and waits for it. And here's how the conversation goes. "I wasna sure whether to speak now or wait until it was done. But as you're here, alone now." She bent toward him, intent. "Did my niece tell you, lad, that I meant to make her heiress to my property?" "Aye, she did." He was at once on guard. Brianna had told him all right, making it clear no uncertain terms what she thought of that particular proposal. He steeled himself to repeat her objections now, hoping to do it more tactfully than she might have done herself. He cleared his throat. "I'm sure my wife is most conscious of the honour, Mrs. Cameron," he began cautiously, but... "Is she?" Jocasta asked dryly. "I shouldn't have thought so, to hear her talk, but doubtless you ken her mind better than I do. Be that as it may, though, I mean to tell her that I've changed my own mind." "Oh." Well, Roger was thinking, this is going positively, until Jocasta has told Gerald Forbes to draw up a new will, leaving River Run and all its contents to Jeremiah, to their son, to Jemmy. And Roger's like, "To wee Jemmy?" He's not quite sure about this, and he's not really sure what Brianna would say. And Jocasta frames it in the sense of, when Brianna weds, the property will become Roger's because a woman's property becomes her husband's when she weds. So she's trying to cover her bases, and Roger's like, With a sense of complete astonishment, he realized that he was being deliberately insulted. Not only insulted, but warned. She thought he was after Brianna's presumed inheritance and was warning him not to resort to any legal contortions to get it. Mingled shock and outrage sealed his tongue for a moment, but then he found words. Why, that is the most, so you take thought for Joan Findlay's pride, but you think I have none? Mrs. Cameron, how dare you suggest that? And then she goes on, she's such a Mackenzie. You're a handsome lad, Thrush. I felt your face, and you've the name of Mackenzie, which is a good one to be sure. But there are Mackenzies aplenty in the Highlands, aren't there? Men of honour and men without it. Jamie Roy calls you kinsman, but perhaps that's because you're handfast to his daughter. I do not think I ken your family. Yeah. So he can't tell her that he's related to Dougal and Galis. And that he was Jamie's nephew, but hers as well. And she's asked around the entire gathering to see who knows his family. And she could not find anyone who knew his Mackenzies. And she wanted to know if he was a con artist who had taken Jamie in. There you have it. Oh, Jocasta. She's a smart one, that lady. She says she thought to leave it to the baby. That way it'll be a tidy way of managing the issue. Because she doesn't really know Roger. And Brianna will have the use of the money until Jeremiah comes of age. Unless anything should happen to the child, that is. And she said this with a note of warning. And he gets pissed at this point. Now he's just mad. Because she has accused him of being so after the money that he might harm Jeremiah. So if Jeremiah comes to any mischief, then everything will go to her nephew Hamish. Cullum's, supposedly Cullum's son Hamish. Oh, he is unhappy. And she's like, I never said that you were going to harm the child. You've said a great deal, and what you've not said speaks louder than what you have. How dare you imply such things to me? And then she, apologizes in air quotes. Ugh, she's a doozy. He wanted to fling the china cakes of plates and biscuits, but he didn't. And then she says, if you cannot love the lad for himself, I thought you might treat him well for the sake of his property. Because he might not be Roger's. Wow, she's covered every single freaking base, hasn't she? So, now he's really angry. Then she continues, Oh, I ken how it is. It's only to be understood that a man might not feel just so kindly toward a bairn his wife's born to another. But if... And this is where he grabs her by the shoulder and he startles her. And he says to her, Madame, I do not want your money. My wife does not want it, and my son will not have it. Cram it up your hole, aye? And that ends this chapter. is Roger telling Jocasta to shove it where the sun doesn't shine. She's definitely Mackenzie through and through. I think Dougal and Cullum would be most proud of her antics. What do you think about that? I mean, she's claiming it's to protect Brianna. It's to protect the money, to protect what they will inherit. And she doesn't trust Roger. She's telling him that 100%. That he could be some kind of liar and not a Mackenzie at all. Because nobody knows his family. Very sly of her. While she's paying for like almost 100% of the wedding stuff. While Phaedra's working on Brianna's dress. Before being sent out. She knows how to get under people's skin. I'll say that for her. So do you think that she's being a jerk? Do you think that she's being a jerk, but her intentions are right? I mean, now we can do background checks and check on people and get a lot of information if we feel so compelled. But all you had then was the Scottish internet service talking to every single family at the gathering, which is what she did. She's wickedly smart, I will say. One thing that I forgot to add before Roger went to go talk to Jocasta is that Roger's incorrect in believing the Regulators had not made it into the history books. When you read about the whole American Revolution, the highlights, yeah, you're not going to see that in there. I hadn't heard of it. But I'm also not from North Carolina. If you talk to somebody who's from that part of the world, oh yeah, that's a huge part of North Carolina history. So it's really important. So it's because he only got the rest of education that other people get, where it's an overview. It's not going to give you every single detail. And if you want to learn more, you have to go through each colony's history to find out more. Otherwise, it didn't make the history books per se, even though it was there, but not the overarching story that we all hear and know. The other part of that exchange was that Roger knew that she was so insulting to him and she didn't care about his pride at all. But she had a history with Joan Findlay, so of course she wouldn't want to offend Joan. Roger, whatever, buddy. You don't have a pot to piss in either. You're bringing nothing to this party, and I don't know who your family is. That sums up society in one fell swoop at that time period. But if you look at the wealthy families of the upper tiny bit of a percentage of people in this country, like the truly wealthy people, it's really not that different. They still have all kinds of rules of engagement. And there's all these ways that you have to fit in. And they have to know who you are. And they yada, yada, yada down the line. And if you don't come from a blue blood family, and I'm glad I never met somebody ridiculously wealthy and tried to marry into their family. Because I come from like hardcore working class people. We are not rich people. And Jocasta reminds me of the kind of people to where the normally rich people that I would be like, wow, I can't believe you have that much money. That's amazing. Like those people are outsiders to the level that Jocasta's at. They're the very small percentage of upper society. It's the people who send their daughters to debutante stuff. And it's quite a different world. I would not know how to live in that world. I can eat at the table. I know how to use the place settings and all the forks and things, but I know my manners. But I could not survive in that world very well. It's a totally different language. a way of living that I have no context for. So we open chapter 12, Virtue, with Claire pondering this being the last day of the gathering, and people are saying their goodbyes, and they're starting to gather their things up, and they're getting packed, and they want to be ready to leave first thing in the morning. And the weddings are really what's left of this day that anybody might be attending. So people are starting to pack up and leave already who may not be staying. And there's the blend of just sheer happiness that you're going to go home, be in your own space, you're going to be able to close the door, you're going to be out of the weather, be able to have your own bed, have your own pillow, all your own things, and not having to wear the same set of clothes in this horrible rain. And then there's also the sadness that some of these people haven't seen each other for years. It's a big deal, even if you have things to sell and barter, and there are things that you need to purchase. It's a big deal in this time period to basically shut down your entire home. And whatever's supposed to be going on for that week or 2 weeks, depending on how far you're traveling, probably 2 weeks total, that you're away from it. It could burn down while you're gone. Whatever crops you have going, even though most of them will be out now, but all the things that you're doing and all your animals, what's happened to them? So it's not like now where you decide to go on a trip for 3 weeks. You can have somebody come and check on your house or house it for you, or just leave it with an alarm set and it's fine. Have somebody come in and check on your cats. It's a lot different, and the requirements a lot different. I know quite a few ranchers, and they can't just up and leave for weeks on end. It's a big burden for them to have to do so. It's very difficult for them to do so. And she feels really fulfilled by all the patients that she got to see and help. And she can't wait to get in her own bed and not be dirty and not be cold. And as she's sitting here pondering things, I closed my eyes for a moment, summoning up a wistful vision of this haven of delight, then opened them to reality, a crusted griddle, black with the remnants of scorched oat cake, soggy shoes and frozen feet, damp clothes that chafed with grit and sand, hampers whose abundance had dwindled to a single loaf of bread, well nibbled by mice, 10 apples, and a heel of cheese, 3 screeching babies, 1 frazzled young mother with sore breasts and cracked nipples, 1 expectant bride with a case of incipient nerves, 1 white-faced serving maid with menstrual cramps, 4 slightly inebriated Scotsmen, and 1 Frenchman in similar condition, who wandered in and out of camp like bears and were not going to be any help whatever in packing up this evening. And a deep clenching ache in my lower belly that gave me the unwelcome news that my own monthly, which had grown thankfully much less frequent than monthlies of late, had decided to keep Lizzie's company. So Claire was just delighting and thinking about being home. But she's not getting to simply pack a couple of bags, turn her hotel card key in, and get into an Uber to the airport. It's not even so good as packing a couple of bags, turning in your room key, and getting on a train. It's a lot different. It's serious camping is what this is. But yet everything you have to do 100% yourself. So she decided to grab a clout that she could find and run down to the ladies' privy. And when she gets back to their camp, there was the smell of scorching metal. And I love this part. I said something very expressive in French, a useful bit of phraseology acquired at l'Hôpital des Anges, where strong language was often the best medical tool available. Marsali's mouth fell open. Germain looked at me in admiration and repeated the expression correctly and with a beautiful Parisian accent. "Sorry," I said, looking to Marsali in apology. "Someone's let the tea kettle boil dry." "Nae matter, Mother Clare," she said with a sigh. "It's no worse than the things his father teaches him a purpose. Is there a dry cloth?" So Claire can't find a dry cloth. It's been damp, rainy, as we know. The weather's been dreek. So she goes to grab kind of through the layers of her skirt. And the heat went through immediately through the damp cloth, and she dropped it. "Merde," said Germain in happy echo. And then he does a little song. "Merde, merde, merde, merde," sang Germain, with the fair approximation of the tune of Rose, Rose, a manifestation of precocious musical feeling that went lamentably unappreciated in the circumstances. So he just kept singing it. Now it starts to hail on Claire, so she's having a very tough moment. She grabs that mobcap that Granny Bacon had made for her and plops it on her head. And she is feeling a bit like a mushroom. And she's going to go to the water and take care of this issue with the tea kettle. And then Jamie shows up with Father Kenneth Donahue. He's bringing him for tea. "Hi, honey." Very bad timing. Sort of reminds me of the day that Frank decides to bring his boss and wife home for dinner. If you can see my smile, the 1950s, 1960s grin. Hey. When Brianna was a baby and she'd had a very bad day that day. All the things had gone wrong. I think their heat had gone out. She couldn't go do the shopping, so she had to order in the more expensive shopping. She poked Brianna with a diaper pin, I think. There was bad diaper rash. I mean, Claire was a mess. So she completely forgot that Frank was bringing home his boss and wife for dinner. When he came home, Claire freaked out. Worst day ever. And so here she burns her thumb. You have Germain doing the merde dance, singing. It starts to hail on her. She's got really terrible cramps. Lizzie's no help, and she's over there laying down moaning. So Claire is not in a good space all of a sudden. And up shows Jamie with the priest to have tea. Now, mind you, she just went through the whole thing of food they had. They have hardly any bread left. They have some apples and a piece of cheese. There's not much going. And when he says he brought the priest a tea, she says, "No, you haven't." Oh, I love the dynamic between them. It's really funny. He's like, "Ooh." Then he sees the mobcap, and it startles him. And he goes up to her, and he says, "Is that you, Sassenach?" And she says, "Owing to the presence of the priest, I refrained from kneeing Jamie in some sensitive spot and contented myself instead with an attempt to turn him into stone with my eyes, a la Medusa." So he takes care of Germain and his song and gives him a candy. And then she goes to reach for the kettle with her hem again because she dropped it on the ground. And he finds a sturdy twig and hooks it for her. And he says, "Voila." And she says, "Merci." But no gratitude. So she took it, and now she's taking the kettle down to the water. And when she gets down to the little rock-studded pool, she takes the mobcap off, flings it down, and stomps on it. I did say the mobcap died a death, didn't I? Died a death. Of course it died a death. But did you die? Yes, the mobcap died. And she hears from behind, "I didna mean to say it was not flattering, Sassenach." "You didn't mean to say it was flattering, did you?" "No. It makes you look like a poisonous toadstool. Much better without. So he thought she looked like a mushroom too, and a poisonous one at that. So he comes to her and kisses her. Or tries to kiss her. And she says, but 1 inch farther and I think I might just bite a small piece out of your lip. Ooh. He straightened up and very, very slowly took his hands off her waist. Oh, he said. He tells her she looks a bit frazzled. And he tells her to sit and close her eyes, rest for a moment. She apologizes. And he turned half smiling to look up at me. For what, Sassenach? It's not as though you've refused my bid. Or at least I hope it's not come to that yet. The thought of making love just at the moment was absolutely at the bottom of my list, but I returned the half smile. No, after 2 weeks of sleeping on the ground, I wouldn't refuse anyone's bed. There's Claire's humor. No, I'm just frazzled. Something griped low in my belly and proceeded to twist. I grimaced and pressed my hands over the pain. Oh, that kind of frazzled. Yes, that kind of frazzled. So she needs the kettle back so she can steep some willow bark tea. And willow bark tea was, even in that time, probably not the best herbal that could have been used because it thins the blood and it can really wreak havoc, just like regular aspirin from the salicylic acid on your stomach and can cause ulcers for long time use. But in a pinch, it could definitely help. And he tells her to hell with the willow bark. And he gives her some very, very good whiskey to sip on. I love you, she said. I love you too, Sassenach. And now she feels so much better as the amber liquid warms her from the inside out. He had gotten the whiskey from Jocasta to be a wedding gift for Brianna and Roger, but he thought Claire needed it more. That's very cute. You're right. Claire did need it more. And in Jamie fashion, he says it's been 3 months since the last time she had her cycle. He thought maybe she'd stopped. This always took Claire back just a little bit. But she knows that he's a farmer and a husbandman. Animal husbandry. Husbandman is a difficult word for me to say. He was intimately acquainted with the gynecological history and estrous cycle of every female animal he owned. I supposed there was no reason to think he'd make an exception simply because I was not likely either to farrow or come in heat. It's true. It's totally true. And she explains to him that it doesn't just switch off, that it gets erratic and eventually stops. Those of us who are in this time period of life, in perimenopause, let me tell you, oh yeah, it's a crazy trickster. And the definition of menopause is not having a menstrual cycle for 365 days. So you can get 11 and a half months into that and have a period, and the clock starts over to 1 year. I personally am on the countdown towards menopause. I am so looking forward to being done. And yes, it is quite erratic, I will just say. And he tells her that he thinks it might be a relief to have done with it all. Less mess, and she's thinking about sex. Like, oh really? Less mess? Oh. She takes a little bit more of the whiskey and she hears a woodpecker. And she says the kind Jamie called a yaffle. And I put a link in for what a yaffle is. It's a green woodpecker. I thought, okay. Also has other meanings, but that's what it means here. And then As they're sitting there together, he says he has to ask her for forgiveness. So she forgives him and then asks for what? She's thinking probably not adultery, but it could be just about anything else, up to and including assault, arson, highway robbery, and blasphemy. God, I hoped it wasn't anything to do with Bonnet. What have you done? Well, he's done nothing, but he promised that she would do something. So he basically offered up his services. And she's concerned he has signed her up to go see Farquhar Campbell's terrible mother, but that's not it. He's promised Josiah Beardsley, this young man of 14, that she would take out his tonsils today at the gathering because she said it was no big deal of a surgery. And he did have horrifically abscessed tonsils. And she had seen him the day before in her clinic. Jamie wants him to come work for him. That's what it comes down to. Jamie wants Josiah to be a tenant. Because he does have a skill that is definitely 100% necessary. Okay. So they go and stop talking about Josiah for a moment. And we move to the militia. Now, that was just this morning in this scenario that Archie Hayes read that proclamation, and in the same day that he gave Jamie that sealed letter from Tryon saying he needed to gather a militia. So apparently, any man between 16 and 60 must serve in the militia. Whoa. As long as they can, right? So there's now we're talking about the militia, and Jamie says Tryon's got him by the bollocks. And I'm no inclined to see whether he'll squeeze, So really, Tryon gave Jamie all that acreage to settle in the back country, knowing he was Catholic. And I know in the TV show it didn't come up. I don't know why it didn't come up, because it was actually a really important part historically, that it had to basically be a white Protestant. And also, Jamie's whole Jacobite thing, Ardmere prison, even though he served his time, that's another big deal. So if he didn't do what Tryon wanted him to do, all of that could get taken away. He could be exposed. So now Claire wants to know who's going to be staying on the ridge and who is he taking, considering that 16 to 60 is a pretty broad range. So Jamie points out that Fergus can stay because of his hand. Joseph Wemyss can, because people still think he's a bond servant, even though Jamie paid his bond. Nobody else knows that. And then one of the other women's husbands has a wooden foot, so he can't go. And then old Archbug, who is 70 years old, he's going to be the caretaker. So there's a handful of men, maybe about 8 boys under 16, to look after 30 homesteads and more than 150 people. You know, Claire thinks the women can manage almost everything by themselves because there's no crops to deal with. And there shouldn't be any difficulties with the Indians that are nearby. They have good relationships. And now she wants to go back around to Beardsley and find out what the deal is with him. He's a hunter, a serious hunter. And he brought, just to the gathering, this 14-year-old, 200 weight of wolf, deer, and beaver skins. And he did it all by himself. Jamie's like, I couldn't do better. I need this because, number one, it's a commodity that they can trade in, and it can help keep people warm. So he made a deal with Josiah that Claire would take out his tonsils if he would share 50% of his take from all of the hides. That's pretty good. And then Jamie's like, why can't you do it today? Claire's like, I can't do it. And she said that even though it's not amputating a leg, it's not necessarily that simple. Like, she can't do this kind of surgery, throw a few stitches in and send him on his way just because of infection risk. And she doesn't have any antibiotics, obviously. So she says, what about when we get back to the ridge? But Josiah has some business, in air quotes, to attend to and will not be there till probably December. Then she's going to do it. So he has to live a couple more months with these terrible tonsils. And then she will do it. So apparently, Jamie is well apprised of the day that Claire had. You did nicely with the dog. Oh, you heard about that. Oh, aye, and the lad who chopped his foot with an axe, and the bairns with milk rash, and Mrs. Buchanan's toothache, and your battle with Murray MacLeod over the gentleman's bile ducts. It was rather a busy morning. He tells her the whole gathering is talking about her. And he tells her he thinks of the Bible, seeing all the crowd clamoring around her. And the whole multitude sought to touch him, for there went virtue out of him and healed them all. Claire laughed. Fresh out of virtue at the moment, I'm afraid. Dinna fash. There's plenty in the flask. There's plenty in the flask. That's so cute. So they make a deal. She'll take out the tonsils when Josiah gets to the ridge. And then he moves on to say they're having this really nice, quiet moment. Probably they haven't had a lot of these moments during this whole gathering. And he says, speaking of the Bible, you can. And he's thinking about Sarah when the angel of the Lord came upon her and told her she would have a baby the next year, and she laughs. And Claire is like, most women would not find that funny in that situation. But she did have the baby the next year. The Bible says she did, says Claire. I'm not going to call the book of Genesis a liar. And people are starting to look for Jamie. Their time together is short. And he says, well, the point is that so far as I can, if your name's not Mary and the Holy Ghost is not involved in the matter, there's only the one way of getting with child. Am I right? So far as I know, yes. Aye, and if so, well, that must mean that Sarah was still bedding with Abraham at the time, no? And they were quite old. And then Claire's like, you were thinking perhaps I wouldn't want you anymore? You didn't want me now. I feel as though my belly is full of broken glass. I'm half soaked and mud to the knees. And whoever's looking for you is about to burst through the shrubbery with a pack of bloodhounds at any moment. Are you actually inviting me to participate in carnal revelry with you in that mound of soggy leaves? Because if you are... No. I didn't mean now. I was only wondering if... And the tips of his ears had gone a dull red. If you were to get me with child at this point in the proceedings, Jamie Fraser, I would have your balls on brochette. As for betting with you, though, once you have a bet again, I promise I won't refuse it. Oh. Well, that's all right then. It's only, I wondered you can. This is the kind of conversation that I just love with them. It's just quirky. And you never know where it's going. Like, why is he talking about this? He's worried when they're old, she won't want to bet him. Or if she's got bored with him yet. So Joseph Weems comes through the shrubbery and tells Jamie of a difficulty. And that he needs some help because there's an issue between Rosamund Lindsay, and Ronnie Sinclair. All right. And then we also find out from Marsali that Father Kenneth has been arrested. Oh my goodness. The weddings are supposed to be happening in a matter of hours at this point. And now he's really mad, Jamie, is because they took Father Kenneth from his camp when he and Claire were talking. And also, a ham has been stolen. So Jamie has all these things to deal with from all the people who need him to deal with. Oh my goodness. So interesting, Claire comes back to that Bible reference and says, "At least it's only the sick ones who want to touch me. What do you do when all the virtue's gone out of you?" He glanced down at me, and a slow smile spread across his face. Ignoring the flask, he stooped, cupped my face in his hands, and kissed me very gently. That. Then he turned and strode downhill, presumably full of virtue, once more. So Jamie has everybody clamoring for his attention now. And we get to see him, that's in his full blossom, right? He's going to take care of the things, fix the problems, make sure everything's handled, and hopefully get that priest straightened out. Like, that is not cool. And you have to remember that there aren't very many Catholics, practicing Catholics in North Carolina. There's no priest in North Carolina. Jocasta had to pay for him to come down from another colony. Okay, so what do you think about these chapters? I feel like we're finally getting some movement. 12 chapters in on this gathering, this last day. It's finally starting to move forward. And yes, so much of this could have been truncated. I mean, it could have been edited down to probably a few chapters and didn't have to take up, how many pages? More than 10% of the book. So the other links that I put in that were interesting were a couple for home remedies and natural remedies for menstrual pain, willow bark uses, that kind of thing. And I love that Jocasta used an ointment that had lavender and golden seal. So she's using a combination of herbals as well to deal with Roger's poor face. So what did you think of this? I mean, we get to see a little bit more about the mama business with Marsali, and she has the kids, and it's hard, and she's tired, and Germain is his sparkling self. That kid has chutzpah, let me tell you. And Claire being annoyed at basic camp life because people are letting things slide, and so she has to take care of it, and she burns herself, has her period. That'd be the worst ever. To be like roughing it camping, hardcore camping, and start your period. Yeah, that does not sound fun at all. Especially when you don't have good tampons or proper pads. And to think of it, they didn't wear underwear. So did they pin the cloths they were using to their underskirt and to their shift? So they didn't, I don't know. Who knows that answer? I could Google it, but I'd rather ask because one of y'all knows the answer to that. I know I looked it up once, but I think it is. I think that they actually pinned it to the underside of their shift if they had pins. Otherwise, you really couldn't do anything if you didn't have pants or some kind of undergarment to put on, which they didn't wear underwear. That does not sound pleasant at all. And then they have to ride their horses all the way back home. I'd be grumpy too. Poor Claire. And I will just say that in perimenopause, when you're leading up toward menopause and your menstrual cycle gets super wonky, that those cycles can hit you like a freight train. It can just be massively horrendous when they do come. It could be very mild and nothing, or it can be like the world is ending. So Claire totally needed that whiskey more than Roger and Brianna. I'm just saying. So I wanted your feedback, 719-425-9444, or contact@adramaofoutlander.com. What do you think of these chapters and the story in general? How the pacing of it, what we're learning? I love the next chapter, which is Beans and Barbecue. Oh, Claire and her 20th century self. And really, the basis of the next chapter when they talk about barbecue is hilarious because barbecue wars are still real today. It's on. Kansas City, Texas, North Carolina. Name your kind of barbecue. It's on. Everyone thinks their barbecue is the best. I prefer a dry rub and a vinegar-based sauce if I'm going to put a sauce on, like my pulled pork sandwich. So that's my preference with some coleslaw. But yeah, there's definitely a preference in detail, and that really encompasses the next chapter, much to my delight. All right. So where do you find A Drama of Outlander? Facebook page, the Facebook group. Please come over and join. It's awesome with really smart, fun people. Great admins. And Instagram and Twitter are Drama of Outlander. And of course, the website is adramaofoutlander.com. If there are any topics within Fiery Cross you'd like me to hit just by itself as something additional, please drop me a line. And of course, I just want feedback on how I'm doing. I want to know if you like what I'm doing, if you want me to change it up, want me to speed it up and do more chapters. I can totally do that. But we're sitting at an hour right now, and I did these 2 chapters. So just let me know what you're thinking. And as far as I know, season 5 is just starting filming, though Sam Heughan was at Graceland yesterday. There's pictures on the internet. So I don't know. And I read something also that there's a shuffle in the writer's room again. I really wish they could keep a set of writers that really knows these characters and helped form these characters on the television show so we could get some cohesion, and so it would make better sense and it wouldn't seem so different and so different episode to episode. I wish there was like one lead writer and the rest of the writers in the writer's room helped, but that we'd have one voice in the writer's room, because it would make, to me, that seems to be the difference in shows that are just episode in and episode out really flourish. It's because the voice is consistent, and I want to see that consistency. Now that we're in season 5, and they've gone through how many writers? Anyhow, how might this be adapted to the TV show? I think pretty much everything except for the conversation with Claire and Jamie about the militia and the ridge, because he would tell her about that note and what he was going to do, and Roger talking to Jocasta, her talking to him and him telling her off. I think from both of these chapters, that's the only 2 things besides the priest at the very end, like, of the episode. The priest has been arrested, and then it fades to black. Because, oh no, the wedding. And this could happen at the end of episode 1. And then episode 2, they're dealing with the wedding and how's, the weddings and if it's going to happen and all that stuff. And then leaving and going home. So I think they could really easily do it in like this whole gathering in 2 episodes. But that's what I think will be in the show. Just those 2 little bits of information, as well as the priest being arrested, because they're not going to talk about menstruation. They're not going to go into detail. They're going to talk about, I'll talk about it all day long. It's kind of my wheelhouse, but they're not talking about Lizzie's period and Claire's period on the show and cracked nipples. I'm just saying. And Germain's not going to dance around saying shit, 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 shit in French. Even though Germain definitely has some of the best lines of the book sometimes. That kid is amazing. All right. So, come and find us on social media. Send me an email or a voicemail so I can include it in a future show. If you are somebody who makes Outlander-inspired products and you would like to give one away with me, that would be awesome. Let me know. And of course, the last way you can support the podcast is financially, which is patreon.com/adramofOutlander, or you can send a one-time offering if you want to help me pay for all the things that go with the podcast. And please share the podcast. If you love it, if you like it, share it with other people. Go into iTunes from Apple Podcasts and do a 5-star review. It helps people find me. And you can also go into other streaming services and also leave a review. And there you have it. So I hope you have a fantastic week. And we're almost to the end of the longest day ever. Things are going to speed up so much after this. So fast. You're going to believe how much adventure they get into in such a short period of time. All right. So until next time, Slán je va.